Hello and welcome back to Rue's Life. So I'm here in the Polytunnel. It is 18.8 degrees in here and 15 degrees outside, and it's just 7:45 in the morning. We've had a really decent amount of rain yesterday and overnight, so I've only really had to water here in the Polytunnel this morning. It's the first week of July and I thought I would give you a plot tour. So we'll start off here in the Polytunnel, that's where we already are. And after a really slow start to the season, things are really starting to catch up at last. So let's head down the other end and have a little look. So here we've got some of the peas that I sowed quite some time ago. I've got some going outside, but they weren't doing brilliantly, and I had some spares, so I've popped some in here, and they're doing okay. They're starting to climb, and the ones outside are also improving, and I'll show those to you. And we have had a few harvests from those as well. The tomatoes, I've now got five, 5 pots or tubs with the tomatoes, and I've put the supports in ready, and they're starting to look really healthy. They need a little bit of attention. I need to just get rid of some of that unwanted foliage just to make sure there's plenty of air circulation around them. So that's on my to-do list. And then if I just move the camera down, we've got a couple of pots, the blue tubs with just flower mixes in them, and they're starting to come, and we've already got a few little flowers there, and there's lots more to come. And then the far green tub to the right, those are my only remaining chilies, and they're not looking brilliant, but they've got two chances, haven't they? So I shall leave them alone. And then while we're at this end of the Polytunnel, if I just turn you around, I've actually brought the potatoes, which are in the bags, into the Polytunnel. Let's just move this camera a little bit more, just because I wanted the space, and also I wanted to, there's less likelihood of slugs in here, so with the plastic bags I didn't want to be creating lots of essentially mini slug hotels. We've got a whole row, it's like a monopoly board of hotels, so in here there's less likelihood of that happening, and I was running out of space outside, and I didn't want them just placed onto the grass, so that's why they've been moved into here. And then up on the staging, I've still got a few bits and bobs going on here. So I've got my backup beans here, because I've been having slug issues and pigeon issues outside, which I will show you. So those are backup beans, and I'm going to get them really established before I put them out. And then let's just get a little bit closer. And then in the far left there, I've got some leek, which I sowed from seed, and they're looking okay. Not as many germinated as I would have liked, but there's a fair few in there, and I may yet sow some more. Then I've got a few herbs that I've germinated, which will need moving at some point. I've got some more romaine lettuce seedlings there, some really pathetic sweet peas. My sweet peas have been terrible this year. These are just a few backup spare brassicas, which I will put out at some point. And then these pots here are squash that I've not long sown. They haven't germinated yet. I wouldn't normally be sowing them this late in the season, but when we get outside you'll see why I'm doing that. So you know what, I'm going to see if I can establish them, and then I'll just grow them later into the season. And you know, instead of harvesting sort of August, September time, I'm going to try and push that off into October, weather permitting. And then we'll just move around again. The baskets, there are some flowers in some of them that are not long germinated, to be honest with you, and I've done a second sowing in some of them because they weren't doing brilliantly. This one I had sown chamomile in, but it didn't germinate, so I've just popped a flower mix in there. Again, I wouldn't expect it to have germinated yet. And then if I just move around, I've popped some of my pelargonium into this one, and you can just see that there are actually, in those two, there is some germination, and they're coming along quite nicely, so they should be quite pretty when they start to flower. And then in the little box underneath us, if I move you down, here we've got the basil, and that's doing absolutely brilliantly. And then let's move on to the beds that are to my left. So here I've got some carrots that are doing great, and then these are the romaine lettuce which I've been growing for the chickens, and they're really enjoying them. And as I work my way through those, the seedlings I will then pop into there as the next batch. And then moving down a little more, finally my courgettes are starting to grow. This time last year and the year before we had abundant courgettes. We were already eating them, but they're finally starting to come, and as I say, it's just a slow one this year, but we're catching up. This tub here is a bit of an experiment. It's where I have my cucumbers, and they just died for no particular reason. I treated them just the same as I always would, and it just struck me that I had bought quite a few bags. I normally get my compost from a local independent store called Stan's, but with everything that's been going on this year, I did pick up a few bags of cheaper compost actually from Aldi, and some of the bags didn't look great, and I'm wondering if perhaps the bag was contaminated. So I've actually just popped a spare random tomato plant in there to see. So what I've done is I've given it a good dig over, I've added some other compost into it, I've mixed in some chicken manure pellets, and then I gave it some time, and then I've planted and watered it, and I've put this tomato in. Now the tomato looks to be doing okay, so if the tomato survives and doesn't die it's been there about a week now, I'm going to give it a few more days. Well, in fact, I'm going to give it until the cucumber plants are established, and I think I actually forgot to mention those, so we'll go back and look at them in a second. So essentially I'm going to leave this tomato here, and if it's still alive and not dead by the time the cucumbers are ready to put in, that will tell me that it's not soil contamination and it was just one of those peculiarities. So then I will put the cucumbers in. I didn't want to waste a whole tub of compost if in fact there was nothing wrong with it, but at the same time I didn't want to risk putting the cucumbers in if they were just going to die again. So let's just flip round again and I'll show you the cucumbers. So just here I've got two. I sowed 4, but I've got 2, and they're starting to look quite healthy, so I'm going to really get those established. I will pop them on into bigger pots, and I'm going to really get those established before I put them into that final place, and hopefully that will have solved the problem. Otherwise, and again, normally this time we should be eating cucumbers, so again they're going to be really, really slow, but everything's slow this year, and if I just get a few cucumbers I'll be happy. What will be will be. So let's go back to where we were. So to the right now of the tubs we've just been looking at, there's some leek in here that aren't looking brilliant. I popped them in here temporarily and then never moved them outside, so I may just pull them up and eat the ones that are edible. I might consider putting them outside, we'll see. And then to the right of those I've got my carrots, which are looking really healthy, and then the aubergine plants, which aren't looking brilliant, and they're kind of in a similar state to the cucumbers. So they start off looking okay, then they seem to just not grow, and then they start, as you can see, the one in the far left hand corner, that's the healthiest of them, but you can see the others aren't looking too great. Let's just get a little bit closer. So you can see of the 5 plants, the far left one is looking the best. The one on the left closest to us in the corner isn't looking so good. The one in the middle looks okay but is tiny, and then the 2 to the right look like they're just shriveling up and trying to die. So I'll leave them there and see what happens. I've no idea what's gone on with those, but again, they've got 2 chances. So let's move to the right, to the big long bed. And this bed is absolutely thriving. So I've got my chard there in the corner. I think it was rainbow chard and another one, I can't remember, but they are just brilliant, and we've been picking and eating those, and also giving little bits to the chickens. And I'll just move a little bit closer because I'm really pleased with the whole of this bed, but all these leafy greens are doing brilliantly. So here I've got, as I say, the chard, and then in between everything, I'm just going to move the polytunnel door so I can get a bit closer for you. So I know they're really closely planted, but it's working, and it actually works that I have to just keep pulling the outer leaves as well as a few of the inner leaves, but predominantly the outer leaves, to keep the light coming in for the bits in between. So the chard on the left there, and then next to that we've got a salad which is the mustard red frills, and it's coming, although it would be bigger if it wasn't so crowded and shaded out, but it's coming, and it won't be long before we can take some pickings from that. Then we've got some rocket, which again we've been eating. You can see it is starting to try and flower, so I'm just nipping those tops out every morning and giving them to the chickens. To the right of the rocket there is some land American cress, which again, the same as the red frill mustard, it is a little bit close, a little bit crowded, and it gets a little bit overshadowed, so it's just taking a little bit longer to establish, but it's coming. Then in the middle of it all, this is spinach. To the left of the spinach we've got some lamb's lettuce, which again is coming slowly, and then to the right that is Mizuna here. So I'm already picking, as I say, and eating bits and pieces, and the slower ones to come are establishing, and I'm really, really pleased with it. Then we move to the right, and let's move the camera. So here I've got my red baron onions that I grew from seed, and they're looking great. And then I've got my parsnips. So if you remember from previous videos, I sowed 4 rows, 2 varieties, and these ones on the right germinated, and they're establishing, as you can see, very nicely. The ones on the left closest to us, they didn't germinate, so I did a second sowing, so they're actually doing well, but they're just a bit behind the others. But actually that should work out quite well when it comes to harvest time, because some will be ahead of the others, so I'm really pleased with those. So that's the polytunnel. I'm really pleased with how everything's finally catching up. So let's go outside. So I've got the hanging baskets on the shed, and I'll give you a little closer look, and they've got the pelargonium in them and also my little window box, which I will show you. And then on the left here, they are the morning glory, which I'd never grown before, and thank you to a heads up from a couple of you guys. I hadn't realised that they could be so invasive, so I've popped them in a pot and I'm going to let them grow up over the shed. I might put some support there just to get them going, but they're still quite small. The poppies in the pot here, or in the old bucket, are doing brilliantly, and if we just get a little bit closer, I'll just zoom in. I'm not sure if the camera's picking that up, but they are getting close to flowering, which is brilliant. So that's one of the baskets. Let's move along. This one's actually starting to flower. And here's my little window box, and again that's doing really well. Again, slower than I would like, but catching up. And I still have my little pot of lavender, which still hasn't got into the ground, but it does look awfully pretty. So let's go and look at the veg beds. So I'm going to start with the things that are doing quite well before I go on to show you the things that aren't doing so well. So the brassicas, after losing the entire batch of my first lot to slugs and pigeons, predominantly pigeons at the time, they're doing really, really well. I'm really, really pleased with those. So we've got cauliflower, sprouts, purple sprouting broccoli and kale. And then, so that's bed 3. So in bed 2 here, you can see the celery at the end there is actually starting to go to seed, but that's fine, that's what I wanted it to do. That's from last year, and we are still cutting and eating that, but I'm going to let it go to seed and save some of those seeds. And when we're on the other side, I'll show you the baby celery, which is that I planted out, that got pecked by pigeons. I covered it with a soil sieve, and now it's more established, and I've got other things in place, which you may have seen in my previous video, how I'm keeping pests at bay. I'll pop a link above to that. That is starting to establish now. You can see I've got Californian poppies everywhere, and they look absolutely beautiful. I'm really enjoying those. I've got a whole variety of colours. They will open up as the sun and the warmth comes out, but they close up overnight, which I rather like. But of course, I'm not showing them in their best light for you guys, but I'm sure you'll see them in other videos. Then we've got at the between the celery and the onions, we've got some leek, which we are pulling and eating, and they are delicious. Then we've got the onions, which are doing really well. The shallots, the banana shallots that I got from my sister, again they're doing great. The alpine strawberry, and then here is where my garlic was, which just I didn't do at all. I lost the whole lot. And this, although it looks very strange, these are all my spare tomato seedlings, which I've just bunged them all in. I haven't labelled them. It's going to be a surprise if they grow and what we get. These are the ones that I would normally have given away if I'd been at work. I give to work colleagues and friends, but with everything that's been going on this year, they were just sitting in pots. And I thought, well, do you know what? I can't bear to just put them on the compost heap. I had this bed space because the garlic failed, so I've just popped them in, and they may or may not do. So it's just a whole mosh of various tomato seedlings. And then we'll move on to bed 1. So I will show you the beds from the other end so you can just get a closer look of the things that are up there, but let's walk through what's in here. So I've got some corn at the far end with the little windmills in between underneath the owl. Then the broad beans, which are doing okay. I had double that volume of plants initially before they got pecked by the pigeons, and then I netted them. They've come back quite strong and the nets are now off, and I am getting some beans. So not as many as I would like, but I'm going to get a little mini harvest. Then we've got the peas, which again, they're not as tall as I would expect them to be, but on this side aren't doing as well as the ones across there. I'll get a bit closer for you in a minute. But we are starting to pick and eat some of those. So again, what I'll do is I'll show you everything, and then I'll do some closer filming of everything so you get a better idea of how things are coming along at the end. Californian poppies looking great. There is actually some calendula mixed in with that, but the calendula's not doing brilliantly, which is ridiculous because calendula is so easy to grow. And then my beans, you can just see I've got 4 remaining plants from my original, I think there were 12, 14 plants. There's another one that's been chomped, so I know it's going to die. So let's get a bit closer. So these remaining ones are actually starting to climb now, and I'm hopeful that they're going to do okay. And once the ones in the polytunnel are much more established, they will go into these gaps here. So let's move round to the other side. So here you can see the baby celery, which is coming. Again, it's further behind than it should have been because of the decimation from the pigeons, but I'm really pleased that I actually managed to save it, and it's coming. And you know, it's working quite well. We've got the celery here, and then as this one's finally ended, this one should be more established, so that's great. And you can just see the onions and the leek from this angle. And here's a better view of the corn, which again, only 2 plants are looking really healthy, and there's a few stragglers, but they'll do what they'll do. Then I finally finished bed 5, so let's move around so you can see that. So I've got my strawberry plants at one end and up to the middle, and then the raspberries are here. Then if I just move you round without making you too dizzy, behind me we've got the rhubarb, which is looking absolutely fantastic, and we've been eating it. And then across into the kind of messy zone, though, to the right of the compost bays, I've got a tub of rhubarb which came from my sister, which was going to go into bed 5, but I quickly realised there was no space, so it can stay where it is for now. And then the potatoes in the cardboard box beds from the collaboration that I did with Erica from Erica's Little Welsh Gardens. So they're looking great, and I'll pop a link above to the video where Erica and I made those beds and talked about why we were doing them and how we made them. And I'd be really interested to see how Erica's potatoes are getting on. So let's move now to bed 4. So bed 4. Here you can see 2 rather awful looking Yukiki-kiri squash. Last year my squash harvest was fabulous. My squash by this time last year were taking over the bed. They were actually in bed 3. I grew them on the ground last year, and in fact we had such an amazing harvest. We've only just finished the last of those because they stored so well. This year I started out with I think 12 or 14 squash plants. These really are the only survivors, and they don't look like they're going to survive much longer. The slugs are just decimating them. So having decided this year to build a fabulous structure to grow them up, and I was going to have this amazing squash frame that was going to be a green, you know, hedge almost of foliage with the squash. I'm not even sure that we're going to get one squash climbing up it, but I have got my backup seeds and I'm going to keep trying. So let's just move the camera so you can see that all the plants went out at the same time, and they are just, you might be able to see there's one there, and I think that's pretty much the last one. Every time I come out, or there's another one. Let me just move the camera a little. There's another one here, which, you know, that's not going to survive now. It's got no leaves. So they're just being chomped, 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 chomped. And as I say, these two, every day I come out, there's a bit more gone. But my plan is, I've got the backup ones. The nematodes, which should have arrived, should be coming very, very soon. So by the time I get the new plants in, I can water in those nematodes and hopefully I can get them established. I have got my beer traps everywhere, as you can see. I've got them all around here. I've also got them in with the brassicas, and I also have some in with the beans. So all in all, lots that's doing really well and a couple of disappointments, but you know, that's growing, isn't it? So I really hope you've enjoyed this video and my tour and update of the plot and polytunnel. I'll leave you with some footage of some closer imagery of what's growing. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you all again soon.